few weeks ago at our world competition, we got this award. Now, the Think Award is an award given out to the team that best creates a code that is a high-scoring, creative, and most importantly, consistent code. And I've gotten a lot of questions on how do you make your code consistent. So today I'm going to be going over the top 5 tips to make your code consistent. Let's get going. Okay, tip number 1 is to make sure that when you are practicing your code, you have your field on a level location. Now, this might seem a bit silly, but it actually affects your code a lot. Now, whether it be 1 degree or 2 degrees, it will really affect your code down the road. So just try to make sure you're practicing on a level location. If it's outside, maybe if possible, move it inside for the week before a competition. Tip number 2, try to eliminate all friction against the wall. Now, this might seem silly, just like the first tip, but it will affect your code by a degree or 2. So when you're turning or you accidentally drive forward a bit too much, try not to scrape the wall very much. There are some exceptions. I'm not going to go into details, but for the most part, just try to eliminate all scraping against the wall. Tip number 3, instead of having one large code, try to make smaller codes that you run separately. This is because, let's say the first step in your big code or the 5th step in your big code gets messed up. Then the rest of that code's going to be messed up and your round is totally destroyed. But if you have tiny codes and one step goes wrong in your first code, it might affect the first code, it might not. But it won't affect any of the other codes, and that's good. Now, this might seem like an obvious tip, but tip number 4 is when you are starting your code, do not press the button super hard, because I've seen a bunch of teams do this. My teammates do this. I used to do this. When you're pressing your buttons, you can actually push the robot and change that code by a degree or so. And then if you try to restart it because you noticed you did that, then you're going to waste like 5 seconds of the match. So really make sure that you're touching the buttons lightly, and I'd recommend using some touch LEDs because you can touch those very lightly and they're very sensitive. Tip number 5. This probably sounds a bit weird, but before you go about coding your program, I would recommend that you first drive your program so you see the necessary steps, then have someone write them down on paper, then go about coding. This will just make a much more efficient process so you're not constantly guessing what the next step is to do. I hope you found these tips helpful, and thank you so much for watching.